Fear of the coronavirus, along with misinformation about its spread, could lead to stigma and discrimination towards people contracting the disease, their families, and even healthcare workers. Stigmatized people may be subjected to social avoidance, bullying, and acts of aggression and physical violence, which could have a detrimental effect on their mental health. To help reduce stigma and its impact, you can share accurate information about the virus and how it spread. Speak out against negative statements shared on social media sites, and don't share such videos. Don't refer to coronavirus victims or cases. They are people with COVID-19. Do understand that stigma and discrimination make it harder for people to seek care for the disease. Do your part to reduce fear and discrimination. Be responsible with what you share. This message comes to you from the St. Kitts Mental Health Association. As fears about the effects of the coronavirus pandemic continue, it is natural that people may be experiencing more episodes of anxiety as a result. Common signs and symptoms of anxiety include feeling nervous, restless, and tense, having a sense of impending danger, panic, or doom, hyperventilating, sweating, or trembling, having trouble concentrating and excessive worry, having trouble sleeping. If you are experiencing any of these signs of anxiety, there are some things that you could do to cope. Reach out for help and talk to a trusted friend or individual who could help to distract you from some of the worrying thoughts. Avoid watching too many news items that focus on the negative impact of the coronavirus. Decide instead on a few specific times daily when you could get your news from reputable news sources. Make sure that you maintain some normalcy and regularity in your daily schedule as much as possible. Focus on the things in your life that you can control and do them. You can control what you watch on TV, what you listen to, who you talk to for support, and how you take care of your body. Remember to seek mental health and psychosocial support if necessary. This message was brought to you from the St. Kitts Mental Health Association.
Whether you are a visitor, Kittitian, or Nevision, tune in to ZIZ Television Channel 5 every weekday as we bring you the latest news in St. Kitts and Nevis.
flowstudy.co. The Flow Study site should open. If it doesn't, go to www.google.com. Enter flowstudy.co in the Google search engine. Once the Flow Study site opens up, then select St. Kitts and Nevis from the list of countries. Step 3. Choose Get Started. Step 4. Click on Login. Step 5. Enter the email address provided by the school, which will be your child's name. For example, Jennifer Jones at moestudents.edu.kn. Enter the password given, which is study SKN, capital S, common TUDY, capital SKN. Select the child's education level. You're in.
am Carla Berridge. Join me weekdays at 7 p.m. for ZIZ's evening newscast. We'll let you know what's happening in your community.
Before touching the mask, clean hands with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. Take the mask and inspect it for tears or holes. Orient which side is the top side, where the metal strip is. Ensure the proper side of the mask faces outwards, the colored side. Place the mask to your face. Pinch the metal strip or stiff edge of the mask so it molds to the shape of your nose. Pull down the mask's bottom so it covers your mouth and your chin. After use, take off the mask. Remove the elastic loops from behind the ears while keeping the mask away from your face and clothes. To avoid touching potentially contaminated surfaces of the mask, discard the mask in a closed bin immediately after use.
Many people's income has been severely reduced as a result of the pandemic. There are real concerns about taking care of self and family in this current financial climate. In order to help to manage the stress and anxiety related to financial concerns, focus on gathering information. What concessions being offered by banks and businesses could I rely on to help me? Prioritizing. What bills must be paid first? Which ones could be deferred until a later time? Which ones could be negotiated? Brainstorming. What other activity could bring in an income at this time? Remember, financial concerns are very real and could lead to distress and worry if they are left unchecked. Finding a way to problem solve helps to reduce the stress and anxiety that come with financial woes. This message comes to you from the St. Kitts Mental Health Association.
If you own or work with animals, please follow these tips to avoid getting the coronavirus. Please keep pets away from areas where you are preparing food and eating your meals. Thoroughly wash your hands after handling animals and animal waste. Avoid contact with sick or stray animals. And always remember to wear protective gowns, gloves, and facial protection when handling them. As the novel coronavirus spreads, it is important that you continually disinfect your home. Viruses can gather on surfaces such as doorknobs, computer keyboards and mouse, cell phones, tablets, railings, kitchen and bathroom countertops, and remote control devices. To avoid transfer of viruses, wipe down these surfaces regularly with disinfectants such as Clorox, Lysol wipes, or soap and water. Avoid touching your face or your loved one's faces after touching any of these types of surfaces. It is very easy for viruses to be transferred in this way. When preparing food, be sure to use different knives and cutting boards for raw meat and cooked foods. Wash your hands before and after handling raw meats. Also, wash your hands before and after using cooked food. Be sure to cook food thoroughly before eating it. This is a message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. To avoid getting the coronavirus, remember to wash your hands thoroughly and frequently before and after preparing food, after using the toilet or changing a diaper for a baby, sick person, or the elderly, after blowing your nose, and after leaving large gatherings or moving away from persons who appear ill. Encourage others to wash their hands and also use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer of 60 to 70% solution. Stay away from events having large gatherings of people. You can expose yourself to more possible infections in large groups. Also, avoid sharing cutlery, cups, glassware, etc. with others. Viruses can linger on these items and may be transferred this way. Avoid shaking and holding hands, and hugging or keeping an infected person in close proximity. This is a message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA.
The coronavirus pandemic has caused upheaval in the lives of many people, and the increased stress that it has caused is a very normal response. High levels of stress impacts people's physical health, how they feel, and how they think. To help manage stress during this pandemic, it is important to stay up to date with credible sources of information about how to keep yourself and your family safe, maintain connections with family and friends, while remembering to observe social and physical distancing. Practice relaxation techniques like deep breathing, yoga, meditation, stretching, and relaxing visual imagery. Focus on positive aspects of your life and any new opportunities that this situation is bringing to you. Engage in physical activity, even in your home. This helps to boost mood and reduce levels of stress. Stress levels can be managed by having a problem-solving approach, by managing the things that you can manage, and by adopting a positive attitude about your capabilities. This message is brought to you by the St. Kitts Mental Health Association.
When you feel a sneeze or a cough coming, try to prevent sneezing or coughing into your hands, as this will contaminate your hands and spread germs. Covering your mouth prevents the spread of germs. You probably knew that, but the way you cover up also matters. And that means breaking a habit you've done all your life. Cover your mouth and nose with flexed elbow or a tissue, not your hands. Discard the used tissue in an appropriate bin immediately. Then, wash your hands with soap and running water to help stop the spread of germs. Turn on water. Wet hands. Apply soap and lather up. Focus on washing your hands for at least 20 seconds. Wash the front of your hands, the back, between fingers and around the nails. Rinse hands under running water. Use something clean to wipe your hands, preferably a disposable paper towel. The best way to wash your hands is using running water and soap. But sometimes we don't have that available. When not available, use hand sanitizer that should have at least 60% alcohol content. Your health is your responsibility. This message was brought to you by the Ministry of Health, St. Kitts.
Is on.
Good day, and we welcome you to the National Emergency Operations Center COVID-19 briefing for the 28th of May, 2020. We thank you very much for joining us for today's briefing. I am Les Roy Williams. We continue to update you with information pertaining to the management of the COVID-19 pandemic here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Whether you are joining us in the diaspora or you're here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we thank you for staying abreast of what is happening with respect to the state of emergency that was instituted as a result of the management of the COVID-19 pandemic here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I would like to invite Superintendent Cromwell Henry, Divisional Commander for District A, to give his report. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and a pleasant good afternoon to all. Over the past 24 hours, law enforcement made 5 arrests of persons who were in violation of the curfew order and for persons who were not wearing the mask in public. This brings the number to date of persons arrested to 149. And as I mentioned previously, these cases, or some of these cases, trial of these cases are due to begin on June 8th at the Bastille Magistrate Court, well, at the various magistrates' court in the Federation. The police are investigating several traffic accidents around the island that occurred close to the start of the nightly curfew. We are beginning to see a pattern of significant damages resulting from these accidents around this time. The most recent of these accidents occurred last Monday night on the F.T. Williams Highway, which resulted in a pole being completely uprooted from its base, leaving the area without electricity for some time. We suspect that these are persons who are hurrying to get home before the curfew. We remind residents, in particular motorists, that you are to give yourself sufficient time to get home without having to drive above the speed limit or driving risky, taking risks. Some persons do not even stop at the roundabouts. They just go straight through, disregarding persons who may be already in the roundabout or who are approaching from their right. Businesses are reminded also that you are required to close within a reasonable time so as to give your customers and your staff sufficient time ahead of the curfew period, which begins at 8:01 p.m. We recommend 6 p.m. closing time for gas stations and supermarkets, and 7 p.m. closing time for smaller shops in the communities. Once again, we appeal to road users to observe all traffic rules and to give yourself sufficient time so as that you do not have to exceed the speed limit or break traffic rules in an effort to beat the curfew. The life you save may be your own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. I recognize the Honorable Wendy Phipps, Minister of State with responsibility for health, who have joined us. I now call upon Dr. Marissa Carty to give us the Health Emergency Operations Center COVID-19 situation report. Dr. Carty.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and a pleasant good evening to all. The World Health Organization reports 5,593,631 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with 353,334 deaths. In the Federation, 394 persons have been tested, with 379 persons confirmed negative and 15 persons confirmed positive. All positive persons have recovered. To date, there are 0 deaths. Currently, there are 7 persons in quarantine in a government facility, and to date, 815 persons have been released from quarantine. The Ministry of Health would like to take this opportunity to remind the general public that COVID-19 is still with us. Therefore, it is prudent that we continue to adhere to the regulations. Please be reminded that there is currently no vaccine for COVID-19. Therefore, the best way to prevent illness is to avoid being exposed to this virus. The virus is spread mainly between persons who are in close contact with each other, that is within 6 feet. Respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks can land in the mouths and noses of people who are nearby or possibly be inhaled into the lungs. Studies have also suggested that COVID-19 may be spread by persons who are not showing symptoms. With a viable vaccine at least 10 to 12 months away, we must not become complacent. As a nation, we must adapt to this new norm and do all we can to remain strong and healthy. Therefore, put distance between yourself and other persons outside of your home. Stay at least 6 feet from each other. Do not gather in groups and stay out of crowded places and avoid mass gatherings. Keeping distance from others, is especially important for persons who are at higher risk of getting sick. It is through your cooperation that we were able to contain this pandemic so far. We are all encouraged to work together, doing our part to reduce the impact of this disease. Remember, maintaining the overall health of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis continues to be our individual and collective responsibility. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carty. I now call Mr. Abdias Samuel, the chair of the COVID-19 National Task Force, to address us. Mr. Samuel.
Pleasant good afternoon to all. Thank you again for joining us again on this, our 59th NEOC daily report. And I want again to begin with my theme. I want to be the first to be last and the last to be first. So to those of you who are listening via radio, watching via television, and tuning via the internet, a hearty welcome to you and thank you for being consistent with your listening. The compliance we continue to monitor the activities as per the 311-911, the NEOC, and also the EOC on Nevis. And if we look at the figures, we see that police, along with the prank calls, are the most highest calls that we are getting. Again, let me appeal to persons to do their best in not interrupting the telephone lines of communications for emergencies. These prank calls are really horrendous. I have to say it that way, and we must do our best to mitigate against such. The Compliance Task Force continues their visit, as the team visited a total of 37 businesses today. And when it comes to some of the particulars, again, good hand hygiene or good hygiene practices And the distancing practices, those are very good. And as we look at some of the other particulars, we can see on the slide that these particulars are being adhered to. When we look at the liquor, it seems as if we are making some good strides in that area, even though I've had persons call me with a number of matters or issues or concerns regarding those bars and liquor stores. And we keep reiterating that the retail liquor license has been suspended, and wholesale liquor license, if I am correct, it still remains the same. So it means that you cannot be selling cold beers for persons to sit down in front of your shop or whatever to drink. And I think Superintendent Henry has been doing a great job in educating us against such. And we look at our personal hygiene, and that in itself is very commendable to see that the behavior of the business places and our citizens is changing. Today, the task force, members of the task force would have visited a number of high schools in St. Kitts in order to prepare our fifth farmers to undertake their CXC examinations. The Washington Archibald, Bastia High School, the Sadler's High School, and we ended at the Charles E. Mills Secondary High Schools. I must say I was very impressed with the measures that have been put in place and the mechanisms that are in place for students to be able to access these rooms safely. And I want to commend the Ministry of Education, in particular the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Hodge, along with his team. They did a tremendous job in ensuring that the protocols are adhered to. I want to acknowledge at this time Exquisite Taste, who donated some pastries to the NEOC, and also to you, Jackie Martin in New York City, who logs on every day once she has the time to listen to the briefings, and also to all of our nationals, friends and colleagues in the diaspora who are listening. Jackie donated $150 to the differently abled, $150 cash for the Cancer Society, and it should be 100, sorry, that was an error, it should be 100 US for the nurses at JNF who work with COVID-19. So thank you, Jackie, and I am certain that from each institution, I will take the opportunity to say a very, very heartfelt thank you for the acknowledgement. Let's take a look at our hurricane tip for today. And during our hurricane tip, we want to speak to evacuation. So who do we want to evacuate according to these tips that we want to provide you today? Persons in low-lying areas should go to a safe spot. And it's important, though, that you have a plan. Where do I go? Where do we assemble? How do we communicate when we reach to the assembly points? Once we reach the assembly points, how do we do a head count, meaning accountability for all the members of the family or the community, depending on how large and who is the target audience for evacuation. And before you leave, shut off the water and also turn off your electricity main switch. These are some of the things that you are being encouraged to do. Also, what is critical when you receive information of a pending impact is that you secure your computers and your electronic equipment so that if you lose your roof, you may have the chance of salvaging your electronic equipment. Also, it's very important that you cover equipment with plastic sheeting and secure them properly. So, once your roof goes, hey, you might be able to have your television survive. Yes, so, in spite of all, you might be able to save something. I have been receiving a lot of questions, a lot of queries, a lot of statements, concerns from citizens across our societies. And it has to do with a number of social media videos and activities, bearing in mind that we are in a political season. I again want to refer you, our citizens, to the statutory rules and orders, SR&Os, number 19 of 2020, the emergency powers for COVID-19. And Section 10 speaks for itself to the restriction and social activities. I was here on Friday when the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Hilroy Brandy, made an appeal to all political leaders and the citizens and residents of St. Kitts and Nevis for us to conduct ourselves in a civil manner and be mindful that we are still dealing with a pandemic, and we are to exercise every precaution necessary to protect yourself and those around you. The reality is, it's a sensitive environment, but I wish to make an appeal to all political leaders at this time to promote safety and security as a priority to all of their followers. It is critical, it is important. Let us not lose the gains we have made. And I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it again. Let us protect our brand, and we, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, are that brand. Thank you very much for listening, and we do look forward for your question this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. We now come to the question and answer segment. And the first question is for Mr. Samuel. Mr. Samuel, if a national wants to come home, how can they start the procedure so that they may be granted permission to come home? And how long will this take?
Mr. Williams, thank you for the questions, and to the person who have asked the question, thank you. And let me refer you to Section 11 of the Statutory Rules and Orders. It says, for the purpose of preventing and controlling and suppressing the spread of the novel coronavirus or COVID-19 with immediate effect, A, except with prior written permission from the airport authorities, all airports, including private airport and fixed base operations, shall be closed to incoming international flights. So any national who would have found themselves stranded or desirous of coming home will have to apply to the port authorities for permission to do so. As to how long would it take, that I cannot say. Okay, so that is the process. You apply to the airport authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. And there is an appendage to this question. In regards to the students overseas, what plans do you and the rest of the task force have in place to allow these students to return home? Many of them are depressed and lost their jobs because of COVID-19, and not all are benefiting from the assistance of the government. Minister Phipps, I know that some of the students have returned already.
Good afternoon to everyone, and Mr. Williams, thank you for that question. If you can be so kind as to repeat the question so I understand it carefully.
In regards to the students overseas, what plans do you and the rest of the task force have in place to allow these students to return home? Many of them are depressed and lost their jobs because of COVID-19, and not all are benefiting from the assistance of the government.
Okay, well, up until a few moments ago, when Mr. Samuel would have spoken to me, since, let us be clear, I am not a member of the task force. The task force is represented, Ministry of Health is represented on the task force by the Chief Medical Officer, and of course, supporting her would be Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, the Medical Chief of Staff. What I would indicate is that until a few minutes ago, I was not aware that there were additional requests before the government in terms of students who wanted to be repatriated to St. Kitts and Nevis. I am advised by Mr. Samuel that those requests would have been lodged with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What I would say in answer to that question is that, as has been done in the case of the repatriation of the students from the University of the West Indies, a similar exercise would have to be done in terms of investigating the requests, the nature of the requests. I realize that your question was also multi-pronged in terms of some of those students claiming that they were not receiving the assistance that the government had put in place. And of course, that too would have to be investigated, because to the best of my knowledge, that was done based on expressions of interest. And as far as possible, the government would have made that support available to those students. Having also said that, depending on where these students are located, because the questioner did not say where these students are, but I have to assume they might be in North America. We do have university students in the United States Virgin Islands as well, but I happen to be aware that our ambassador in Washington, Her Excellency Dr. Thelma Philip Brown, would have been at the center of a support arrangement for students who were based in the U.S., and that support would have been through the auspices of Kittitians and Nevisians in the diaspora. They also assisted. And I think on this very program, up to a week ago, both you and Mr. Samuel would have indicated that the Sandy Point Benevolent Association, as well as other groups of diaspora citizens who live overseas, would have put in place arrangements where funding would have been made available to some of these students based on the requests that they would have made. Having received the question, however, what I am prepared to do is to communicate with PS BAS so that we can get some further information on the extent to the request and the nature of the request, because they will have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you very much, Minister Phipps. And this is our last question for the day. And it has to do with spirit. Earlier, I asked about the small shops selling beer and Guinness as takeaway. I was told that only wholesale establishments can sell alcohol. Why then I can go to the Chinese supermarket and buy 3 Heineken and leave with them? I don't think it's right. Superintendent.
All right, I think we would have dealt with this issue before, but I'm always happy to reiterate and to clear up any ambiguities that one may have. The object is not necessarily to restrict the sale of alcohol. The object of the restrictions that are in place is to prevent the consumption on premises where persons are in close proximity to each other, that in situations that would promote the spread of the disease. You mentioned that a person would buy 3 Heineken from the supermarket and leave with them. It is not the case at a bar. You would not buy 3 Heineken at a bar and leave with them. Generally, if you buy 3 Heineken at a bar, you would either drink all 3, or you would share them among your friends who would be congregating around a table or around the counter in close proximity to each other, laughing and having fun, and spreading droplets, which is a means of transmission of the disease. So the difference between the supermarket and the bar is that you buy at the supermarket and you leave with it. At the bar, you buy it and you drink it in place. And that is what we are trying to prevent in the regulations.
Thank you, Superintendent Henry, and that brings us to the end of our question and answer segment. I do have an announcement for the public. Skelett would like to advise the general public that an emergency electricity supply outage affecting Spooners, Cunningham, and parts of Keon occurred today, Thursday, 28 May 2020, at approximately 3:30 p.m. The estimated restoration time is 8 p.m. Please dial 465-2013 to contact the Skelett Emergency Hotline for further information. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And today is Nigel Farrell's birthday. Nigel has been very committed to the COVID-19 briefings. He's here every day, and we want to wish him many more years of life and God's blessings. I would like to thank Superintendent Cromwell Henry, Divisional Commander for District A, for his report, Dr. Marissa Carty for the COVID-19 situation report, Mr. Abdias Samuel for the NEOC report, and for giving us those hurricane tips. We thank Mrs. Christmas Jacobs for her service of sign language. We thank the media who continue to partner with us in the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. We thank Ms. Vesta Southwell for being a part of the communications task force with respect to the COVID-19. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for joining us for today's briefing. Tomorrow we will be back at 5 p.m. Until then, take care, be safe, and see you tomorrow.
Is on.